Hey there, it's Charlie, and welcome to the second official zoo episode of my series, Accessible Adventures. As you may or may not know, I'm chronically ill and disabled and use a variety of mobility and assistance aids in my daily life. Initially, I really struggled knowing what I could or couldn't do out in the world when it came to accessibility. I spent a lot of time researching before going out on adventures, but found that there just weren't enough resources for me to adequately rely on. With that in mind, I decided to start this series, Accessible Adventures. Each episode of the series will focus on a different location, venue, or activity and review its accessibility. The aim is to provide a resource to other people with varying access needs and help them plan their own accessible adventures. Now, before we jump into this video, I want to share a quick disclaimer. I originally started filming this video back in June of 2024 and have been gathering footage over multiple zoo visits over the last 2 years in order to be able to share everything with you. Over that time, there have been some changes to the zoo as well as some temporary exhibits, but I'll let you know about that as we go through. I have also changed a lot over that time, and I wanted to give you a heads up so you won't be surprised when I suddenly lose or grow my hair. With that out of the way, let's get back to the video. Today we'll be exploring Melbourne Zoo in Victoria, Australia. I'm sure I've made it clear by now that I really love zoos, and I do intend to share all 4 Victoria zoos with you. Melbourne Zoo is one of the 4 zoos that make up Zoos Victoria and is located in Royal Park, about 4 kilometres north of Melbourne CBD. There's a lot of great accessibility information available on their website, which I highly recommend you check out before you make your way to the zoo. There's a link in the description if you want to check that out. If you have any questions though, all of the staff and volunteers are really kind and happy to help. The first step of any accessible adventure is of course to make your way to the destination, and so that's where we'll start our journey today. Melbourne Zoo is accessible via train, tram, bus, or car. If travelling by train, tram or bus, the route information is available on the website along with the relevant stops to get off at and the pathway to the zoo from each of them. There are 2 entrances to Melbourne Zoo, the main gate and the rail gate. Trains, trams and buses stop closest to the rail gate. If travelling by car, there are accessible parking bays at both entrances, 6 at the main gate and 7 at the rail gate, as well as a pick-up drop-off bay outside the main gate for those who need it. There's also a parking map available on their website that details all the different parking areas and public transport stops for your convenience. It's also worth noting that if you have a level 1 disability parking permit, you don't have to pay for parking at the zoo, but it is overall paid parking. As is the case with all 4 Zoos Victoria zoos, if you're not a Zoos Victoria member, you do need to pre-book your tickets either online or on the phone, but if you are a member, you don't need to pre-book. At the entrance, there are lines for members and non-members where the staff can check your tickets before entering the zoo. This is also where you can grab a map of the zoo, or you can download it from the website before your visit if you prefer. The map includes all of the animal enclosures, keeper talks, bathrooms, and eateries around the zoo. In addition, there is also a separate sensory map that details areas of different sensory experiences, like loud noises, strong smells, crowded areas, low lighting, and more. Once again, this can be found from the zoo's website or from the staff at the front entrance. Finally, each of the Victorian zoos has a social script available online that helps to show exactly what to expect throughout the zoo to help you prepare. Melbourne Zoo also has a comprehensive and detailed access key on their website that includes just about every piece of accessibility and sensory information you could possibly need to navigate the zoo. Honestly, this was a great resource to me while putting together this review, as it really helped remind me of every little detail I wanted to discuss with you. I really recommend checking it out before you go. I have of course linked it in the description. There's also an information booth at the main gate if you need any assistance in person. This is a good time to discuss wheelchairs and strollers for hire. If you need them, the zoo has both single and double strollers available for hire, as well as manual wheelchairs. If you're wanting to utilize one of the zoo's wheelchairs, there's a link to their online booking form below, which they recommend filling out at least 48 hours prior to your visit, as there is only a limited number of wheelchairs available. Unfortunately, there are not any electric wheelchairs or mobility scooters available for use. Once you've arrived at the zoo and have your map in hand, it's time to explore. First off, we're going to talk about pathways. The pathways are all intended to be able to cater to mobility aids or strollers, but there are still accessibility concerns that we'll explore a little later on. There are several different types of pathways throughout the zoo. The vast majority of the pathways are concrete or wood, but there's also dirt, gravel, sand, and more. Most areas of the zoo are still accessible via wheelchair, but some areas are harder to navigate and might not be accessible if you have mobility needs. Overall, I find the main pathways to be very accessible to me in my electric wheelchair, but I do definitely struggle on a few of the animal viewing trails. While exploring, you may find yourself needing to take a break every now and again, which is why having adequate rest spots is really important. There are a lot of of benches around the zoo, including some form of seating at most of the animal viewing areas, and there are also multiple dining and picnic areas with additional seating as well. When it comes to food and drink, you can bring a picnic from home or grab a meal at one of the many eateries around the zoo. There are 6 eateries in 3 different areas of the zoo, which are each open daily. Opening hours do vary shop to shop, but each can be viewed on the zoo website. During peak periods and school holidays, there are multiple other places to eat around the zoo, many of which are in different locations to the other eateries. There are also a series of vending machines around the zoo for snacks and water fountains to refill your drink bottles. The 3 primary eateries are the Giraffe Lookout Cafe, the Meerkat Cafe, and the Lakeside Cafe. The Giraffe Lookout and Meerkat Cafes are each standalone kiosks with outdoor dining available. The Lakeside Cafe is located in the Eat and Play district and has both indoor and outdoor dining options available. There are also bathrooms located inside the Lakeside Cafe, but not an accessible bathroom. In addition to the Lakeside Cafe, the Eat and Play district also houses 3 other eateries, multiple outdoor dining options, additional bathrooms, a first aid building, a heritage carousel, and a large playground. When it comes to accessible bathrooms around the zoo, we do have several to choose from. When entering the zoo from the main gate, there are 2 separate toilet blocks to the right and to the left. The toilet block to the right as you're facing into the zoo does not have an accessible bathroom. However, the toilet block on the left has 2 separate accessible bathrooms. The first accessible bathroom is unfortunately rather small and strangely shaped, which can make it a bit harder to navigate in a wheelchair, which does feel rather counterproductive. Fortunately, the second accessible bathroom in the area is a changing places bathroom. As is the standard, the changing places bathroom comes fully equipped with an adult changing table and hoist, in addition to its accessible toilet facilities. However, you do need to have an MLAT key in order to access the changing places bathroom. Just past the main gate, you'll find Keeper Kids, an indoor play area for children aged 8 and under, as well as the indoor viewing area for the Komodo dragon enclosure. This is where you can find the next accessible bathroom, but unfortunately I don't have any footage of this one to share. The next 2 accessible bathrooms are in the Eat and Play district, one of which is located via the parenting room, so I don't have any footage to share of that one either, unfortunately. The other accessible bathroom in the Eat and Play precinct, however, is a reasonably good size and condition. The only thing worth noting is that the door is a little bit heavy. There's an accessible bathroom located on the Forest of Wonder trail that is a combined parenting room. The bathroom itself is a little cramped, but in good condition. However, during my visit, someone had recently used this bathroom to smoke cigarettes in, and when I went into it, the smell was still thick in the air and made me really dizzy. After leaving the Forest of Wonder trail, the next accessible bathroom is located around the corner from the Giraffe Lookout Cafe. Once again, this is a combined parenting room. The bathroom is split into 2 parts when you enter, with the toilet and changing table on one side and the sink on the other. There's a decent amount of room to navigate around this, but it can make opening and closing the door a little bit more difficult depending on your mobility aid. This is also a heavier door. There are toilets on the Lion Gorge Trail, but unfortunately none of them are accessible bathrooms. The final accessible bathroom in the zoo is near the rail gate next to the picnic pavilions. Unlike all of the other accessible bathrooms around the zoo, this is not a standalone toilet. This accessible bathroom is simply a large cubicle at the end of a row of cubicles with all of the sinks on the opposite wall. This is typically one of the bathrooms I try and avoid when I visit Melbourne Zoo because I don't want to have to use the hand controls on my wheelchair before I'm able to wash my hands. There are a lot of great things to do around Melbourne Zoo, and at the time we visited in June of 2024, there was a dinosaur exhibition. Animatronic dinosaurs of many different varieties filled the zoo and provided an interactive and educational experience. There was even a multi-point stamp system to build your own souvenir, a card of a tree frog. This exhibition has now closed, but it was a wonderful addition to the day, except for its accessibility barriers. While collecting stamps and viewing the dinosaurs, I was surprised to find out that not only did the dinosaurs move and roar, they spat at you. One dinosaur specifically spat long streams of water at you without warning. I believe it may have been activated by motion sensor. Most people seem to be surprised or taken aback when they rounded the corner to the next dinosaur and discovered themselves suddenly damp, but this was particularly worrisome for me as I use an electric wheelchair. In case you're wondering, electric wheelchairs don't like being wet. Disappointingly, the final stamp collection point was also located in the middle of a pine bark play area that was impossible for me to navigate in my wheelchair. I actually got stuck a few times and had to be helped out by Ian. While it was only a temporary exhibit and I still enjoyed myself, I was disappointed by the accessibility barriers. I think this leads nicely into my least favorite but arguably the most important part of any accessible adventure review, the pain points. I'm sure you know by now that I love visiting the zoo, but I do still struggle. Overall, I do find Melbourne Zoo to be quite accessible, but that doesn't mean I won't acknowledge the challenges facing accessibility. As I mentioned, there are a lot of different path types around the zoo zoo, like wood planks, concrete, dirt, and sand. Additionally, each different animal viewing trail aims to emulate the environment the animal lives in. For example, the gorilla rainforest is surrounded by dense trees and ferns, rocks, and dirt paths, whereas the lion gorge utilizes paved or concrete paths with open grass and rock enclosures for the big cats. This is both a stylistic choice as well as an extension of each habitat to its viewing areas. I actually really like how well immersed it makes me feel in each environment. However, not all of these environments are accessible. One of the biggest issues with pathways around the zoo is how steep they are. As the zoo itself is on a hill and a lot of the habitats involve multiple levels of viewing, there are a lot of steep slopes and ramps throughout the zoo that can reduce the accessibility. Some of the ramps and slopes are steep enough that my electric wheelchair may lose its grip and slide or skid out of control. This is especially problematic in the gorilla rainforest, where the wooden plank ramps are so long and steep and don't have enough plateaus to rest and recover on. This is especially dangerous if it's been raining, as the wood is very slippery when wet and doesn't have additional grips on it. The other significant concern with this walking trail is the steep concreted paths down to the gorilla viewing area that are lined with sharp rocks that jut out into the path. When going down the steep pathways, if you do lose control of your mobility aid, you can very easily end up colliding with the rocks and getting hurt. Additionally, a lot of the surrounding trees and plant lives have begun to overtake the pathways they surround, leaving less space to safely maneuver around them when using mobility aids. I also want to mention the rainforest birds enclosure on the Forest of Wonder Trail. The entry of this enclosure is really steep and at an angle. Every time I go to the zoo, I try and find a way to safely make it down this path in my wheelchair, but every time my wheelchair ends up losing its grip and skidding into the wall. At this point, I've now given up and I will be using the exit instead, but it's still a rather steep path and I'm not sure if it'll be much better. I thought it was worth mentioning so you don't find yourself in the same position. When it comes to pathways, there are also a lot of paths or bridges made of wood planks. Some of these are really uneven and the gaps between the boards could be problematic for someone using a cane or crutches, as well as walkers and wheelchairs. Additionally, there are several paths that are accessed by opening and closing double gates of different materials. Fortunately, I didn't find the gates to be overly stiff, heavy, or rusted, so that's definitely a bonus. It's just something I think you should be aware of, especially as some of the gates can be quite large or awkward to maneuver. Overall, the gates are pretty good though. Now that we've addressed pathways, I think it's time to talk about vision. Most of the animal enclosures have multiple viewing points, which is great because several of the enclosures have at least one viewing point where vision is blocked for people in wheelchairs due to the height of the barriers. This is always really frustrating not being able to see what other people get to, but I do really appreciate that in these cases there are always alternative viewing areas where I can see from in my chair. While of course vision and pathways are relevant regardless of where you are in the zoo, there are several specific areas I want to discuss with you and share my concerns. Firstly, let's talk about the butterfly house. I want to let you know right away that in order to keep the butterflies happy and safe, the butterfly house is kept really hot and humid, 27 degrees Celsius to be exact. Especially if you're visiting in the winter, this sudden temperature change can be a challenge for lots of people and can trigger people with conditions like asthma or POTS. As well as being quite hot and humid, the butterfly house also has a bridge about halfway through the enclosure. This is all flat and level with the rest of the habitat, but it's only really wide enough for one stroller or mobility aid to cross at a time. If you're visiting the zoo, I ask you to be aware of this and please don't stop and stand in the middle of the bridge, blocking the pathway. Not only does it stop someone getting past to view the rest of the habitat, it also stops you from being able to leave, as the butterfly house is a walk-through habitat with separate entry and exit points. Now let's take a look at the Japanese garden. Honestly, this garden is really pretty and peaceful, definitely somewhere I think is worth checking out. However, the pathways are really narrow, including a rather scary bridge layout, and in some parts have started being overgrown by the plants surrounding them. Again, this is an accessibility concern when trying to enjoy the garden and ending up with a face full of leaves and sticks. Having said that, I still think it's pretty, but it's easy enough to avoid if you don't want to see it. Next up, I want to discuss the reptile house. From a sensory perspective, I wanted to warn you that this place is usually really crowded and loud. It's a low light area for the sake of the animals, but the noise is entirely man-made. This is one of the areas I really struggle visiting, not because of the reptiles themselves, which are actually some of my favorite animals, but because of the other people viewing them. A lot of the time there are people running and yelling and banging on the glass enclosures in this area. This actually brings me to my biggest pet peeve about public spaces, but especially zoos. For some reason, I have found that when people visit a zoo, they are so overcome with excitement that they stop being aware of what's around them. There has been no bigger culprit of this in my experience than Melbourne Zoo. This is where people seem to have the least spatial awareness and consideration, not only to the other patrons of the zoo, but also the animals themselves. I'm often faced faced with people banging on glass enclosures, touching or attempting to feed animals without permission, unsupervised children trying to climb into active animal habitats, people blocking pathways or viewing areas, or even smoking inside the zoo. We've actually encountered someone smoking on 2 of our visits to film at Melbourne Zoo, and it was really disappointing. Just as a general reminder, smoking is not allowed at any of the Victoria zoos. This isn't just a matter of consideration for the staff and patrons, but for the animals as well. I also find people are especially inconsiderate towards me in my wheelchair at Melbourne Zoo over other destinations. I've been blocked from accessing pathways, had people move me and my wheelchair without my consent, had people constantly pushing past me or invading my personal space, and I've even had someone sit on my feet while I was viewing the baboons. I'm not sure why this keeps happening at Melbourne Zoo specifically, but I've not had these things happen anywhere near the same frequency or degree at any other zoo. I sincerely hope that none of this happens to you, especially as it's only ever been from other zoo patrons, never the staff or volunteers, but I still felt like I should tell you, just in case. Now that we've discussed the pain points of Melbourne Zoo, I wanted to give you a quick elephant update before we move on. During our first filming visit, we got to see the herd of 9 Asian elephants at Melbourne Zoo, but since then they've all been moved to the Werribee Zoo expansion that I'll do a separate video on. I just wanted to let you know that if you go to Melbourne Zoo now, there are no longer elephants there. There is now a Komodo dragon, which I'm really excited to see grow up. It's only small right now, but it's the first Komodo dragon I've ever seen in person before. Once you've finished exploring the zoo, if you're anything like me, you're probably going to go straight to the gift shop on your way out. Well, I have some news for you. Not only is there a gift shop at both the main gate and the rail gate, there are actually 2 more gift shops throughout the zoo. One is located in the Wild Sea area just past the fairy penguins, and the other is located in the Forest of Wonder near the Butterfly House. All 4 gift shops are flat and step-free, which makes them really accessible. However, I will say that the gift shops within the zoo are much smaller than the ones at each gate. Personally, I prefer to wait until the end of the day and grab my souvenirs on the way out, but you could easily utilize any of the shops throughout the day if you prefer. When it comes time to leave the zoo, you're welcome to use either the main gate or the rail gate. Both exits are through a turnstile with an 850mm to 1000mm clearance. I was really nervous leaving through the turnstile on our last visit after the time I got stuck in one at Werribee Zoo, but we were able to make it through without incident and leave safely. At the end of the day, there are several accessibility concerns when it comes to exploring Melbourne Zoo, but I still think of it as a fun, accessible adventure. Once again, I highly encourage you to review all of the accessibility information they have on their website, including the access key, as it really is quite thorough. Once again, the links for everything are in the description. If you have any questions about the zoo or my experience, drop them in the comments and I'll do my best to answer. Also, if there's any information you think would be helpful in my next accessibility video, please let me know and I'll do my best to include it. I'm also open to suggestions of any other places you'd like me to review. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope you liked it. If you did, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on another accessible adventure coming soon. I hope you're having an amazing day and I can't wait to see you all again soon. Bye!